Interesting. That was all he said. One word. And for the next 2 hours, I thought I had done a great job. I was wrong. It happened during a Tuesday afternoon meeting. There were 6 of us sitting around the conference table. My manager, Sarah, was walking us through a new campaign for one of our biggest customers. Beside her sat Ben. Ben had been at the company for almost 10 years. He didn't say much in meetings, but when he did, people usually listened. I had been there for less than a year. So even when I had an idea, I still had that little voice in my head asking, is this actually worth saying? That afternoon, Sarah showed us the first version of the campaign. We need something simpler, she said. Less corporate, more human. Everyone looked at the screen. I had actually been thinking about the same problem all morning, and suddenly I had an idea. I waited. Nobody spoke. So I took a breath. What if we changed the first email completely? Sarah looked at me. How? I opened my notebook. Instead of starting with the product features, maybe we start with a short customer story. Sarah leaned forward slightly. Okay, that sounded encouraging, so I kept going. Something simple. Maybe a customer talks about the problem they had before using the product. Then we introduce the product afterward. Sarah nodded. That could be worth exploring. My confidence went up a little. Then I looked at Ben. He had been listening quietly. He tilted his head, paused, and said, Interesting? I smiled. Yeah? He gave me a small smile. Interesting approach. And just like that, I felt great. Interesting? Good. He liked it. At least that was what I heard. For years I had learned interesting as a positive word, an interesting book, an interesting person, an interesting idea. So when one of the most experienced people on the team called my idea interesting, my brain translated it as, nice job, Emily. I started talking more. We could test 2 versions, one more emotional, one more direct. Ben nodded slowly. I continued. And maybe we don't even mention the discount in the first email. This time Ben leaned back. He looked at Sarah, then back at me. That's interesting. There was another pause. A longer one, but I didn't notice. I was too busy being proud of myself. Sarah finally said, Okay, let's not go too far yet. We should probably think through the risks first. I nodded. Of course. The meeting moved on, and I left the room feeling surprisingly good I had spoken up. Sarah had listened. Ben had called my idea interesting twice. Not bad for a Tuesday. About an hour later, I was working on a rough draft when Maya walked over to my desk. She had been in the meeting too. Are you already working on that email idea? Yeah? I turned my screen toward her. I figured I'd put together a quick version. She looked at the draft, then at me. You're moving fast, I smiled. Ben seemed to like the idea. Maya paused. Ben? Yeah, he said it was interesting. She looked at me for a second. Then she made a face. Not a bad face. A careful face. What? I asked. Nothing. Maya. She pulled over a chair. Okay. When Ben said interesting, she paused. I'm not sure he meant, I like it. I stared at her. What else would it mean? She tried not to laugh. Maybe more like, she lowered her voice. I'm not convinced yet. I looked back at my screen. No. Maybe. But he literally said interesting approach. I know. That sounds positive. It can be. I looked at her. But? She smiled. But sometimes interesting means I have thoughts, and they may not all be good. I laughed. That is a very long meaning for one word. Maya stood up. Welcome to Office English. I wasn't sure she was joking. I replayed the meeting in my head, Ben tilting his head. The pause. Interesting. Then later, that's interesting. Oh, now it sounded different. Very different. Wait, I looked at Maya. So he hated the idea. I didn't say that. Then what did he mean? She shrugged. Ask him. That sounded terrible. You want me to walk over and ask, Hey Ben, what did your interesting mean? She laughed. Maybe not exactly like that. Then she pointed at my screen. But before you spend the whole afternoon building this, I'd probably check. 5 minutes earlier, I had been feeling proud of myself. Now I was analyzing one word like it was evidence in a criminal investigation. Around 3:30, I saw Ben walking back from the kitchen with a coffee. I almost let him walk past. Then I looked at the half-finished email on my screen. Hey, Ben. He stopped. Yeah? Do you have a second? Sure. I turned my laptop slightly toward him. I'd been working on the idea from the meeting. He looked at the screen. Oh, okay. There was that tone again. Careful, neutral, impossible to read. I decided to ask. You said the approach was interesting. Ben nodded. Yeah. I waited. Nothing. So I tried again. Interesting, good. He laughed. I immediately regretted the question. Sorry. I laughed too. That sounded weird. No, I know what you mean. He put his coffee down. I think there's something there. Okay, something there. Good. Probably good. Then he continued. But I do have a couple of concerns. There it was. Maya was right. Of course, Maya was right. What concerns? Ben pointed at the draft. My biggest concern is that if we wait too long to explain the product, some customers may not understand why we're emailing them. I nodded. And we've tested story-first emails before. They can work. But the connection to the offer has to be really clear. That made sense. He wasn't saying my idea was bad. He was saying it wasn't finished. Then he said, when I said interesting in the meeting, I meant I wanted to think about it a little more. I smiled. I thought you were complimenting me. He smiled too. I wouldn't call it a compliment exactly. Great. So I completely misunderstood you. Not completely. He pulled a chair over. I thought the idea was worth discussing. That's different from saying it was good. Exactly. I leaned back. So interesting is dangerous. Ben laughed. No. It's flexible. Flexible. That was one way to describe it. Then he said something I still remember. When people say interesting at work, don't just listen to the word. Listen to what comes after it. I looked at him. What do you mean? If I say, that's interesting, how can we build on it? That's probably positive. I nodded. But if I say, that's interesting, I'm not sure the client will go for it. Not so positive. Right? And sometimes he shrugged. It just means I'm still thinking. That suddenly made a lot more sense. The word itself wasn't the whole message. The pause mattered. The tone mattered. And what came next mattered most. I looked back at my draft. So what should I have said in the meeting? Ben thought for a second. You could have just asked. Asked what? Do you see any concerns with it? I wrote that down. He noticed. You're taking notes? Apparently I need subtitles for my coworkers now. He laughed. Fair. We spent the next 10 minutes going through the idea together. And something surprising happened. My original idea didn't disappear. It got better. We kept the customer's story. But we shortened it. We introduced the product earlier. And we made the connection to the offer much clearer. The next morning, I showed the revised version to Sarah. She read it quietly. Then she looked up. This is interesting. I froze. Sarah looked at me. What? I started laughing. Nothing. No. What? I shook my head. I just need more information now. She looked confused. About what? Is that interesting good? Sarah laughed. Oh, yes. This one is good. I pointed at her. This one is good. I pointed at her. This one, she laughed again. Context, Emily. Perfect. Another thing I apparently needed to study. After that, I started hearing the word differently. A few days later, someone suggested moving a deadline forward by 2 weeks. Ben said, that's an interesting idea. Then he paused. I'm just not sure the client will agree. There it was. Interesting didn't mean great idea. It meant I'm still with you, but there's a problem. Another time, Maya showed me a report she had written. I said, this is really interesting. And I meant it completely. I actually wanted to keep reading. Same word, different message. That was when I finally understood what had confused me. In textbooks, words usually come with neat definitions. Interesting means something gets your attention. Simple. But real conversations aren't always that clean. At work, people are trying to be honest without sounding rude. They're thinking while they speak. They're keeping the conversation open. So sometimes a word doesn't give you the whole answer. You have to listen around it. Now, when someone says, interesting after I share an idea, I don't immediately celebrate. But I don't panic either. I wait. And if I'm still not sure, I ask, what are you thinking? Do you see any concerns? Is there anything you'd change? Because sometimes the most important part of a sentence isn't the word you recognize. It's the pause before it, the tone behind it, and the sentence that comes next. And now, whenever Ben looks at one of my ideas and says, "Interesting, I don't assume anything, I just wait," because with Ben, there is almost always another sentence coming. If you enjoy learning the English people actually use in real offices, meetings, and everyday life, subscribe to FluentTrail English. We'll keep learning it through stories like this. See you in the next story.